Hey guys, what's up? It's Brad from California Weed Blog. Checking out CannaSafe. Let's say hi. Hey guys, how you doing? I'm here with Aaron from CannaSafe. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. Appreciate you guys coming out.
Yeah. So we're here in the new spot in LA.
It's going, man. Been working hard. Finally ready to show it off.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about yourself. How did CannaSafe get started? How did you get started in the cannabis space?
Okay, so I'll give you, that's two different stories. CannaSafe got started actually around the same time that I got started, but I was doing something else, and it wasn't necessarily legal. I actually got started in cannabis in 2010, 2011. I was at school in South Carolina, and I was, selling to some kids on campus. Got in a little bit of trouble there. Lost my football scholarship, and kind of had to reevaluate my life at that point. Fast forward a little bit, I got back in school, got another football scholarship, got my MBA, started my first business, which was a car dealership in Florida. After that, I had a couple other entrepreneurial moves. I did some distressed property, did some consulting, stuff like that. About 2014, I decided I was going to get back in cannabis, but this time I was going to do it the right way. So looked at a ton of different companies, spent about a year and a half just networking before I did anything, and then ended up, finding CannaSafe and doing this deal. And then going back, CannaSafe was actually founded in 2011. Really cool story. In 2012, before any other cannabis lab was accredited or anything, they received their ISO accreditation. They actually called the accrediting body and said, "Hey, can you come accredit us?" And they said, "Well, what do you guys do?" I was like, "Oh, we're a cannabis lab," and they hung up the phone. So it actually was a trial and error process for about 6 months before they could get the auditor to come out and do the accreditation. And finally, they said, "Hey, we said, hey, you're not accrediting what we're testing, you're accrediting our methodology." And they were like, "You know what, you're right." So they finally came out, did our accreditation in 2012, which is kind of a cool story. It's a very proud thing about CannaSafe. We're built on a reputation of being accredited and having integrity, which is very important in this industry.
With your lab in San Diego, right?
Yeah, San Diego County. So when I came on, there was a lab in Marietta, which is Inland Empire, which is actually smaller than this office.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of how it started. That was how, that was what I came into. The lab that we did after that was in San Diego County. It's on an Indian reservation. It's a Santa Isabel reservation. There's 300,000 square feet of cultivation. There's manufacturing. There's 7 or 8 businesses up there. And they wanted us to come up there, since we were accredited lab, to basically test all the product that was manufactured up there. So that was about a year ago. In January, we signed that lease, got that lab open. It's probably 600 square feet, so definitely not a large lab by any means. And we always knew that we needed to be in this LA market. So this lab's 8,000 square feet. We spent a lot of last year finding it, planning it, layout, equipment, everything you name.
Mm-hmm. And so you hit the LA market. What really drove you out to LA specifically?
That was one of the ironic things, is there's no other lab in LA. It's the biggest cannabis market in the world. It's bigger than some states. Mm-hmm. And just the metrics of it, especially coming into a fully regulated market where labs went from being unprofitable to they're going to be profitable. I mean, it was a no-brainer. There's no competition and the biggest market. It was a pretty easy decision.
Absolutely. So, what do you think the biggest changes are now the regulated market has started?
So the biggest changes, I would say, for everybody as a whole in the cannabis industry is now people are operating with the different margins. I call it false margins, because last year and in previous years, people operated their businesses without paying taxes, without paying legal, without paying all these other things like testing that are going to end up being significant portions of their revenue. Like if you were in business and you didn't have to pay taxes, you'd be doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So a lot of these businesses were used to the margins on that type of revenue, and they didn't plan for all these other things. So I think collectively as a market, that's that's the biggest change, and that's going to have the most impact.
So I know with the new market, they've changed the regulations for pesticides. And it used to be, I think, around, 12 that they tested in California, and now it's up to around 60?
Yeah, so the way that they rolled out, actually previously there was no required, until January, there was no required pesticide testing in California. So with the emergency regulations that came out in November, January's phase 1, which is 21, 22 pesticides that have to be checked for, the LOQs, which is limit of quantification, aren't as stringent as they will be in July. And of the 22 pesticides that we're testing for right now, as part of the regulatory testing, only a couple are we seeing people fail for.
And are those new ones that you're seeing?
No, most of the pesticides or PGRs that we're testing for have been around for a decent amount of time. We do phase 1, phase 2. We do all the pesticides that are going to be required at the levels, from July on. And what we've seen is, the most common pesticides that we see are the most common pesticides used in California: meclobutanol, ivermectin, and those are the biggest culprits, bifenazate.
Mm-hmm. And so, what are those 3 pesticides, and what are they usually in?
So I'll cover the most common: meclobutanol, which is trade name is Eagle 20. And California uses over 50% of the Eagle 20 in the United States, and they use it on grapes, they use it on all kind of ag products, and it's safe in low levels of food. And this is with a lot of these other pesticides. This is where the problem is it's been approved for uses in food, but none of these pesticides are made to combust, meaning light on fire. So you take meclobutanol and you light it on fire, and it turns into hydrogen cyanide, which you're inhaling. So you're basically poisoning yourself, which is troublesome for especially people that are trying to use this plant as medicine. And even recreational users don't need to be inhaling hydrogen cyanide.
No, absolutely not. So now with this new regulated market, now that everything's changing, what do you think are the biggest areas of opportunity?
I think the biggest opportunity, and I tell people all this all the time, especially in LA where nobody's licensed. There's there's 130 pre-ICO dispensaries that got basically fast track licensing, and there's probably 5,000 or 6,000 potential licensable cannabis businesses in LA. So you have this new set of rules that came out in November. Nobody's been operating. Nobody has experience operating with these regulations. So all these existing businesses are now going to have supply chain issues because they're, not only are they going to have to act in code with these regulations, but all their suppliers are, or they could be disrupted. So coming to the market, I think there's a window between 6 and 9 months, like starting now till the end of the year, where if you were going to introduce a new product or start a new business, that it's almost a level playing field, given that you can obtain the resources necessary to get going.
Absolutely. So, with those opportunities, do you think labs are involved? Do you think there should be more labs?
I think absolutely there should be more labs. There's, we built this place to have the highest capacity, and I foresee us maxing this one out. And if you just take pure numbers of the potential licensable cannabis business in California, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 75,000. Okay, so right now there's about 25-ish labs that have been given a temporary license. Of those, I would say half or less are actually operating. So you've got 75,000 growers, manufacturers, all these other type of businesses, and 25 labs. So obviously, it happened in Oregon, it happened in several states where there was basically a lab bottleneck because all this product couldn't get through the labs.
So at full tilt, what do you guys can do?
In terms of revenue or
in terms of product, like
in terms of volume. So compliance wise, you have to run a primary and a duplicate sample. So right now we can do 200 a day as our capacity. By the end of the year, we'll be up to almost 1,000 a day. But that's 500 compliance tests a day at the end of the year. Right now it's 100. So
yeah, and with 75,000
companies,
that's crazy.
The 500 products a day that you can test. We have clients right now that if they wanted all their stuff tested on one day, they would max out our capacity for a day and a half, 2 days without handling any of our other business.
And what's your usual turnaround time right now?
Right now we're 2 to 3 days, and we're hoping to maintain that. I foresee a little bit of turbulence once everything kind of funnels into regulation, but we're ready to scale, and we should be able to maintain the 2 to 3 day turnaround.
Well, that's awesome. So for growers and manufacturers that are trying to get their products tested, prior to doing this, what are some tips that you would give them to make sure that they can pass the test and make sure they have full confidence in what they're doing?
Absolutely, that's a great question. I always suggest people do quality control testing. It's way easier to find out to spend $225 and on a pesticide test, $75 on a potency test, to actually know like how your product is, whether you're formulating, whether it's flour, just get a baseline for your product. I mean, in other industries, they have labs internally and they do their own QC, like nutraceutical, pharma. They test their product along the way, and it'd be troublesome to not test your product along the way, package it, and not really know exactly what's in there. Before you spend all the money packaging, you want to make sure that you're going to pass, because we're talking about potential lot of 50 pounds by the 8th. That's a lot of jars that you're going to have to go open up if you didn't pass the test.
So do you think it's more beneficial for them to have like something on site to test, or just sending it off to the lab as much as they can?
It's really difficult to run a lab. It's hard to run. So I would say, especially these people that are juggling all these balls, you can only do so much. You have to focus on your core competency. So I would just say, find a lab that's local or that has a good turnaround, and get your product tested consistently, like weekly, whatever interval you're manufacturing or you're producing your product. You should know at all times, how it's performing. From just a grow perspective, you should be able to track your potency throughout the year. Okay, at this, especially the mixed lighting, greenhouse, outdoor guys, like, okay, I did a harvest in, and I had better potency yield, I had a better weight yield. All that data is very important, especially as people go into bigger greenhouses. If you take that in a 10,000 square foot greenhouse and you can learn to maximize that stuff, and then all of a sudden you're in a 500,000 square foot greenhouse like some of these guys are, that's a potentially $50,000 swing a week, just by improving your potency, improving yield.
Absolutely. So what are you seeing the most negative test results from the manufacturers or from the cultivators?
I would say most negative test results is coming from the manufacturers. There's just not enough clean distillate in the system. Especially, because we do the high times testing, we're the official high times lab, and we test for a lot of these bigger brands. And we've seen problems as they scale. They have supply chain issues. They can't get all of the oil or crude or whatever their starting material is from one source now. They have to go through multi-sources. And again, they're not in control of where it's coming from, so they're having a lot of pesticide problems. I would say the vape pens are probably going to be the market that gets hit the hardest in terms of there's just less than 50%. I would say probably 70% right now fail of the vape cartridges, especially the more popular ones. Flowers, we're seeing probably 50 to 60% fail rate on flower for phase 2.
So with the testing, because I know in the emergency regulations they state that if they don't comply with these testings and they show a failure rate, then they have to destroy the product. So what's the timeline right now that the BCC is giving everybody?
So if it's flour, actually any product, you have 2 chances to remediate.
Okay.
And we have seen some people that are effective, and some of these pesticides have a half-life where it wears off, like microbial problems. If you have salmonella on your flour and you turn it into a concentrate, you're not going to have salmonella anymore. You're using heat and pressure, which is going to kill it. So you do have 2 chances to remediate whatever your product is. But again, a lot of that that's expensive and could be detrimental to your business. So you want to do your QC testing along the way so that you can get ahead of those problems. But after the 2 chances, then if you remediate twice and you're not able to fix the contamination of the product, then you do have to destroy it. And the BCC has methodology for what's acceptable standards for destruction.
So are they starting right now with everything, or are they giving people a leeway time?
So technically they've started right now, but I think, we have less than 1% of the market that's licensed. So I don't know if they're giving leeway, but there is leeway. There's too much jumble going on for them to actually focus on all these microscopic problems. And then given that metrics not online, there's no real concrete way to track all the samples, all the test results, all the taxes yet.
So with the laws and everything going on with the BCC, do you think there are any laws right now, like especially from the testing side, that you think that are either too stringent or too lenient right now?
Too stringent or too lenient? You know, I don't know. That's a hard question to answer because people haven't really been following the rules.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so I would say we haven't really, the rules haven't really been battle tested. You know, there's some stuff in testing that I'd like to change, and you know, I speak to Lori Ajax a couple times a month, and she actually asked me for advice, you know, a couple weeks ago when she was in LA about some standards, which was pretty cool to have her be receptive enough to say, hey, I'm concerned about this. You're the expert. Can you give me a little bit of advice? So I do think they're receptive. You know, there's definitely some things that need to change on the lab side, you know, on the manufacturing side, and we'll see how that plays out with the allegedly final regulations in June or July. I don't think that we're going to be ready for final regulations then. I think it's going to need to be more towards the end of the year after people actually follow the rules, and let's test the rules and let's see what works and doesn't, because it's going to be pretty obvious what doesn't work when everybody's trying to do it.
Right. So do you think people are just, you know, backing away from actually being compliant with everything right now because they just want to be against the rules, or they're just trying to get everything ready with their licensing? Because I know there's still, even in LA alone, just a lot of issues with licensing problems.
I think that there's a mix. I think specifically in LA, I mean, we're in a situation where LA is trying to do final inspections. They're trying to take the state annual license requirements and they're trying to do them for a temporary license. And they're understaffed, they're a little bit undereducated, they really don't know what they're doing, and they're trying to have the toughest regulations in the state, in the biggest market in the state. So I think at some point LA is either going to need help or advice from the BCC. They're going to have to change their whole process, because I don't see any situation where LA becomes licensed at the current rate by the end of the year in any significant fashion. And the problem with that is, like you said, you know, there's a legal shop right across the street from my lab, and I guarantee you they're not testing and they're not paying taxes. And you're trying to regulate all these people that are signing up and say, hey, I'm going to pay my taxes, which are significant. Hey, I'm going to get testing done. I'm going to do all these compliant things that lower my margin. And then the guy sets up a shop right across the street and he's not doing any of those things.
Right.
So,
which is the huge issue with weed maps now.